basically I've got a lot of bowl blanks that I've been sitting on for a really long time, and the reason I've been sitting on them is because they're cracked, and I haven't had the willingness to actually figure out how to deal with it. All right, so I'm going to present just a little presentation here, just to show you what I'm dealing with kind of up close. So tonight we're dealing with cracks. They're so frustrating, so frustrating. So just a quick time lapse of my turning. I really started turning probably 5-6 years ago. I had turned a couple things before that, but I would not consider myself a turner up until then. So I really got into it. It was really fun. I met the Redwood Empire Woodturners Club and went to a couple of their demonstrations, and one of their Saturday demonstrations where I actually learned how to turn a bowl, which was amazing. And so I got really fired up, and I started cutting a bunch of wood, and I started making all these bowl blanks. And of course, I got obsessed with making things as big as I possibly could. So, you know, this kind of stuff where it was just like lots and lots of work, hours of, you know, backbreaking labor. And then of course they all cracked. And so now I have all these bowls that, while they're really cool, and sometimes cracks are cool, but not always. And so I want to figure out a way to deal with it. So this little bowl in the picture here, you can see my feet down at the bottom, and I've got this little crack that I wanted to deal with. This is a super nice piece of maple that had really great figuring in it, and so I wanted to save it. So here's my collection of bowl blanks that all need to be repaired, and this has actually been really good. You guys should try this. What I was doing is I would hide all my bowl blanks away in my office, and I would never know where they were, and so I would never be inspired to do anything. But I pulled them all out, and lo and behold, I started turning again. And so I've decided I'm just going to start putting them in my car seat and like anywhere around the house, so I have to like trip over them, and that way I'll start turning again. So anyway, these are all my bowl blanks I got to fix. Not all cracks are bad. I don't want to say that. There are some amazing pieces out there that I've done and other people have done that have cracks that are amazing. The cracks in this bowl, I mean, not only could you not get rid of all of them, but I think they add something to this bowl. Let's see. But most of the time, yeah, I just wanted turning without cracks. So this is the bowl that was I showed you earlier with the crack in it, that little maple bowl with lots of figuring. And so this is what I've done with it. I basically cut right through the crack and then just glued another piece in. I know it's not revolutionary, but I feel like it was kind of fun, and it adds a little contrast, and it almost looks like it was done on purpose, like it was never cracked. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually split a blank. Perfect. So what I've got here is another maple bowl. I believe that this one came from, this was that silver maple from that guy out in Redwood Valley. And you can see I've got a pretty substantial crack here. This one, it pretty much starts to go through the bottom. And so I really don't feel good about throwing it on the lathe. I'm sure a chuck would kind of hold it together, but at the same time, it's not something I really want to put on the lathe like it is. So it makes a perfect candidate for being fixed. So what I'm going to do is we'll split this bowl down the middle, we'll glue a piece in, and then we'll turn it on the lathe. So the first time that I split the bowl, this one here, I actually cut through it with a chainsaw, and I got to say it was one of the most awkward, probably unsafe, not smart ideas. And so I was trying to figure out the best way to do this. If you could tilt your table on your bandsaw, that might be a decent way. Still feels a little bit weird. And then I figured I was going to try it tonight. I haven't actually tried it yet, but just using a wedge and splitting it right on that crack might be the way to go. Nice and safe, quick, easy. You don't need special tools, just a wedge. So that's what I'm going to try tonight. I'm just going to use a little splitting wedge. I'm just going to drive it down into that crack, and hopefully this thing will split. We'll see. Oh yeah. All right, so obviously I can't glue anything in there right now. Another one of the challenges for me, I've got this lovely disc sander back here. It's huge, and so I can pretty easily push that into it and true it up. At this point, like I said, what I would do is I would true that up. I'm not trying to get it straight up and down. I'm trying to follow that crack as much as possible. The reality is that most of the time they don't go through the center of the bowl, which is fine. It looks intentional if it's off center enough, I think. If it's really close to the center, it might look weird. But this one, I'll true up and I'll just put a piece of walnut, nice contrasty piece. The thickness of this piece of wood is important. What you're trying to do is once you've trued up those faces, I tried using a hand plane and that was not very effective. So yeah, disc sander, sandpaper on a flat surface is probably your best bet. So the piece of wood that you're going to add, what you want, the thickness that you want here, you want to make up there's two things that are going to happen. One, you're going to remove material, right? So you're going to end up with a gap. And then it's really kind of interesting the way this happens because the grain of the bowl is going, with the crack here. This bowl is shrinking in this dimension, but not in the length of the grain. So this dimension is actually wider than this way in the bowl. So not only are you repairing the crack, but you're also making this bowl round again. It's pretty cool. So as long as all you have to do is measure, right? You're going to measure across the bowl this way, measure across the bowl that way, and then the difference between the two is the thickness of that piece of wood that you're going to need. So in this case, this is a little over 1/2 inch. I think it'll end up being perfect. And we'll glue that in there like so. Obviously, it's easier to trace the shape of the outline of the bowl, right? You just use a pencil and trace along here, cut that shape out with a bandsaw, and then you've got a nice strip that's the perfect thing to go through there. While I was making this presentation, I was thinking to myself, man, if I were Pete, what I would do is I would make a little segmented ring that was the perfect shape of that bowl, right? Segmented this way instead of segmenting around the bowl. And you could come up with a really cool looking feature stripe, I think. So anyway, that's another option. In the interest of time and making this like a cooking show, I've glued up that bowl already. And here it is. So this one had 2 cracks. And so you can see the way that this bowl was actually taken out of the tree, the grain was not symmetrical. So normally the cracks would radiate from the center of the tree. Well, in this case, the center of the tree was over here, right? So they're radiating both that way. So it's kind of fun. I think it's going to be an interesting shape. You can see here I had to make up a lot more material because there was a couple of cracks and I only cut through one and I had to sand through the other one. And so I removed a lot of material basically. So this is what we're going to work on tonight. Obviously, if you guys have questions about that process or anything, now would be a good time to ask. And now we're just going to take it over to the lathe and do a little turning. I was just using Titebond 3. I feel like it's probably the best, kind of food grade waterproof. This is the fun part. I have my my mobile presentation stand here, so I'm going to try and make my way back to the lathe. Bear with me. I'm going to run into a few things. Okay, so I guess I should. Since I'm here, I should mention I made a little a cutting station. This is when I first made my bowl. I needed something to kind of hold it. So I just put a couple of pieces of 2x4 here to hold that bowl in place while I was cutting it through with the chainsaw. It's about the only way I could feel somewhat safe about doing it. So we're at the lathe. It's really me, I'm in here. This is just a little, I don't know what you call it. I guess a jam chuck of some sort. I needed something small enough on the end so that it would fit all right here between these two pieces that kind of stick out. So that's why that's there. So that's going to go in there like so. I'll bring the tailstock up, and then I've got to return my tenon. The tenon that I'm making for this is an internal tenon, so I'll be spreading the jaws out in order to grab onto it. And that's just the way that I turn this bowl, and I don't know why I did it that way. I think because this bowl is actually probably a little big for my duck, and so it made more sense to me to leave the meat on the outside and grab onto it that way, as opposed to turning a smaller tenon and trying to grab onto it that way. You can see I've already done, the lighting sucks here, sorry. I've already done this turning just to save some time. We're moving over to the other lathe. Let's see. So, like I said, I'm using an internal I guess a reverse tenon, if you will. And this thing is pretty unbalanced and weird. So I'm going to bring the tailstock up to true up the outside of this bowl. I feel pretty confident in that tenon, where if it was a normal bowl blank and fairly symmetrical, I could actually do this without the tailstock, but it's a good safety thing, especially because, you know, I'm here alone. Okay. Okay, so just checking for clearance. Obviously, I don't want to get my fingers in there or start this thing up before I'm ready. I'm going to be using a bowl gouge for this. This is that. It would be nice if that would focus. Hello. Anyway, it's pretty standard bowl gouge. I've got the wings kind of, you know, swept back. This cutting this stuff it sucks, because it's like cutting a natural edge bowl or something, where I've got these things sticking out and I'm just going to be hitting those for a little bit and nothing else. So I'm basically turning a lot of air. The other thing, let's see if I can show you. I was kind of checking this blank out earlier today. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. Super weird, right? And when I look at it right at the end here, I can actually see on either side of this thing, there's all this fuzzy stuff, right? The stuff that's sticking out of the bowl that I'm going to end up with. And it's actually really thin. I'm a little worried that I'm not going to end up with a whole lot when I'm done with this project, but it'll be a thin bowl. So that'll be fine. As far as the cut, this is probably a really bad spot for me to have the camera. Let me move you guys. There we go. That's a little bit better of a view. You can kind of see the fuzzy stuff on the inside, where it's kind of faint, fuzzy stuff on the outside, and then right in the middle, there's kind of a more solid bowl, and it's not much, but we'll see how this goes. I mean, I'm not too worried about it. I will say the only downside to leaving these things hanging out like this is that there's end grain on those pieces, right? That are sticking up, right? My bowl gouge, they want to tear out, and they're not going to clean up until they have the backing of the bowl blank behind it. And so it's kind of a tough, you end up removing more material than you probably need to. The cut for this, it's just a roughing cut. I'm not going to be riding the bevel at all on this, because if I try and ride the bevel, it's going to push the tool away from the bowl every time one of those pieces comes around. So I'm going to have the flute kind of pointed almost straight up, maybe a little bit towards you guys into the camera a little bit. And then I'm going to be using my hand as a guide here and starting in air basically, and just running across the tool rest. We'll take a couple passes, clean things up, and try and get an idea of what this bowl is going to look like. Oh, hey. Safety glasses. Okay, so some people would be tempted to do this step while they're doing the tenon, to turn the outside of the bowl and the tenon at the same time. The problem with that is that I was using a jam chuck, And basically the force that I would be putting on it with that tool, it would just cause that thing to spin, and I would stop the bowl before I did anything. So now that I have a grip on it with my chuck, now I can really kind of lean into it and get rid of that material. So as far as what this is looking like, so this is that tear out that I was talking about. You can see how bad it is, right? And that's just because there's no backing back there. It will clean up once we get further into the bowl, but you can kind of get an idea. I got these nice stripes in there. Oh my gosh, yeah. It's going to be so fun. I'm going to move my tool rest a little closer now, just a little bit closer. No. And then as I take material off, this thing's going to become more and more balanced, and I can slowly start bringing the speed up, which means I can remove material faster. Whee! Almost to the point where I can really start doing an actual push cut, riding the bevel, getting a nice clean cut. What I've got now right here, that is not hitting yet, that little spot right there. Everything else is pretty good. You can see I've got definite lopsided. The top here is definitely lopsided. This part of the rim is sticking up well above what I have over here. So my next step to kind of true this up and get able to turn this thing a little faster, I think I'm going to move up to the front here and take off those wings. Oh yeah, thing's sticking out a lot. Look at that, they just split right off. Okay. All right, so now we're kind of getting to the point where I can really turn this bowl up. You can see I'm still definitely, I have a lot of material here. It hasn't started hitting on the outside, and you can see I'm going to end up with, well, it's a little bit lopsided. And so there's still going to be some vibration, but at least I can get a little bit faster. Kind of my first push cut where I was actually riding the bevel, so hopefully we'll end up with a little bit nicer cut. You can see the nice oak rays kind of coming through there in here, but that's just because that's unsupported, but I'll clean that up when I do the inside. So I'm going to flip around here and start giving this bowl some character, because right now it's just flat-sided and weird. And the shape of a bowl, I start out with a bowl blank and just kind of turn whatever feels good. And then when it dries and cracks, and then I put glue pieces in, the outside shape may change. So what I'm dealing with right now is the side of this thing is almost perfectly flat just because I was truing it up. And if I reach in there, this part is thinner than the two outsides. So I have enough material on both the bottom and the rim to kind of start creating some sort of more lovely shape, if you will. The push cut, you want to be riding the bevel. So the bevel being that shiny grind, I don't have to tell you guys this, I'm sure you all know. And that's going to be my support, so that I'm not taking out too much material and tearing grain and doing all kinds of stuff. If I have the angle right, so the flute, where I'm pointing that flute, is going to determine how much material I'm going to be able to take off, kind of in the lathe, if you will. And so playing with that between a certain range. Obviously, you don't want it straight up, because then you'd just be cutting with the tip. It would be a hard cut. If you're turning it towards the direction of cut, now the tip of that gouge is actually slicing material as opposed to just scraping. And so that's where you're going to get the nice quality cut. I'm gonna cut to you guys, even though it's probably not the best way to cut this particular bowl, but just so you can see what I'm talking about angle wise. Let's see. Can't really see much. Let's just see how cut quality's doing here. If it's any better, it better be. Yes, much better. So look at this lovely feature stripe now. And no tear out, right? I've gotten through that nasty tear out on the back side of that. I still have a little bit of tear out on the in grain of this oak, but what I'll do is I'll shear scrape that, and once I've got an actual bowl shape here. But you can see I'm going to leave this high spot. Let's see, where am I? Right there, and just start giving it a nice curve. So taking more material off the bottom here and just trying to give it a nice shape. I'm kind of flying blind here, but I would say I've got, I'm probably going to end up with about a 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 at the rim. It gets a little thicker in the center of the bowl, and I actually have quite a bit of meat down in the bottom still. So I've got a lot of room to remove stuff down there. Okay, just want to see how I'm doing on the rim. Shape-wise, we're getting towards somewhere that I kind of like. I've got, I've got just the smallest little piece right here that hasn't been cut yet. So maybe one more pass, and then move on to the inside and call it a day or something, a night. Yeah, something funky about the shape here, but I've still got a little room to play. But, oh, you guys can't see a thing. There we go. Oh, almost. There we go. Look at that. Lovely little feature stripe. Kind of an okay shape. No, that's the thing, is like I have so many bowls laying around that, like I said, it was like it totally deflated me as a turner. I had all this stuff that I was like all excited about. And then, you'd come in a week later and it's all cracked, and you're like, well, this turning thing's not all it's cracked up to be. Oh, stop to do it at some point. Right?
Very nice.
And I have this massive crack, and it's like, well, now I'm going to put a feature stripe in. It's going to be fabulous. This one, with this one, I don't think I can save. Well, I mean, this one actually, I think I could probably just split this piece off with my hand. It's like just barely hanging on. There's just a little bit of material there. And then I've got a bunch that are like, that one, I'd have to put, 5 pieces in, which that's a lot of work. I might just burn this one. We'll see. I'm going to hold on to it, figure out what I'm going to do with it. I don't know. My favorite crack of all time.
Wow.
So I turned green, and I didn't have enough time to finish the bottom. And so the bottom is probably 3/4 of an inch thick, and the sides are, fairly thin. And so it just couldn't move enough. And so it just pulled itself apart. And I love that curl back. Like, I don't know how that happens, but